Is coffee high in histamine? This video filters through the complex connection between coffee and histamine based on years of research and experience. Plus, I cover tips to enjoy coffee safely and 2 brands of low histamine coffee. You can also find the written version of this video on my site linked in the description, but let's get into it. Hi, this is Max from lowhistamineeats.com, where we make and share histamine-friendly recipes. Unfortunately, the relationship between coffee and histamine is rather complicated and unclear. So while coffee is definitely not an antihistamine, the topic of coffee and histamine intolerance is riddled with misinformation on all sides. This is due in no small part to the fact that histamine intolerance is still a relatively unknown ailment, as is IMCAS. Just a quick reminder, I am not a doctor, so this video is provided for information only. Keep in mind that every body is different and some people will tolerate different foods than you do. Please keep the comment section respectful. So, is coffee high histamine? The answer, not exactly. To understand the histamine content of coffee, it's important to understand that few foods naturally contain really high levels of histamine. Most foods which contain high levels of histamine are fermented foods like kimchi and beer, but most coffee isn't fermented for long, if at all. This is because coffee is usually fermented for the sole purpose of more easily removing the skin of the fruits which surround the bean. If fermented at all, this can theoretically build up histamine, though the large amount of processing means it's much more likely that the beans arrive to you contaminated rather than inherently high in histamine. Fermentation isn't the only consideration, however. There's also the matter of caffeine. Caffeine is the bitter molecule in coffee which wakes people up and can be quite addictive. It's been said to block the effects of diamine oxidase, or DAO, an important histamine-degrading enzyme. This basically means that it blocks the cleaning up of histamine from the system. So even if you're drinking an unfermented coffee, if you consume any coffee alongside foods which do contain or liberate histamine, then you may just be worsening your system's response. Coffee may be low in histamine, but for most people, it's still an irritating substance. So is decaf coffee also high histamine? It's possible. Decaf coffee may actually be even worse for you if you have histamine issues due to the way that decaf coffee is processed to remove caffeine. Each of these processes involves either a lot of chemicals or large degradations in flavor, meaning that the former is more often used. Alternatively, but much more expensively, is Swiss processing, which is a technique that's less common but generally safer for both flavor and chemical exposure. Either way, decaf coffee isn't always the best choice, though it works for some people. Just don't add any kind of coffee back into your diet until after your system has calmed down. Ideally, at least a month into your elimination diet, or else you could just undo all of your good work. When adding in coffee again, start with a few sips on the first day, then half a cup the next day, and if you continue to be reaction-free, maybe try enjoying a whole cup. But consider the effects of increased caffeine levels. Unfortunately, some people just may not be able to tolerate coffee at all. If your body can't handle it the first time you try to add it back in, give it another 2 or 3 months and then try again. I know that sounds like a very long time, but you'll get through it. And for those who can handle coffee, there are now plenty of low histamine coffees on the market, and most of them ship. Bags of beans usually come in 12-ounce packages, and if you're not used to drinking fancy coffee, this will definitely cause some sticker shock. But hopefully this list helps you continue to enjoy our favorite beverage in moderation. Number 1, and most often publicized, is Purity Coffee. This is the brand I drank for a very long time, as in for years, though I now tolerate a wider selection. As scared as I was to add coffee back into my diet, I was surprised by how little my system reacts to Purity. The brand was originally started by a husband in search of answers to his wife's own health ailments. Purity's organic green coffee is rigorously tested for mold, pesticides, and ochratoxin A, which may cause kidney damage, and then roasted and shipped within 48 hours of each order. The company's grown a lot in the last 4 years that I've been buying from them, now offering single-serve coffee options, 4 different roast blends, and a heady decaf option, though they've also raised their prices substantially. Number 2 is Clean Coffee. Many coffees hit the stomach like a lemonade, hard and acidic, but Clean's beans are low acid and independently tested for mold, mycotoxins, mycotoxins, acrylamide, heavy metals, and more than 300 pesticides. And yes, they have the receipts to show for it. But beyond just picking a low histamine coffee, there are a few tips I've picked up over the years for drinking with histamine issues. Number 1 is to buy organic mold-free beans, like the ones I just mentioned, or other brands you can find locally. And to go for a regular brew rather than decaf, unless you know exactly how your beans were decaffeinated. Darker roast beans will actually have lower levels of caffeine, which is slowly degraded during the roasting process. So if you're grabbing coffee while out and about, go for the dark roast. Number 2, when you're getting takeaway coffee, only order organic coffees prepared fresh on site, not the stuff that's been sitting around in the pot. A pour over would be a good choice. Order your coffee black or with a small amount of milk or non-dairy alternative, and no sugar unless you're adding it and controlling the amount yourself. Number 3, to reiterate, sugar is not your friend. To sweeten your coffee, stick to histamine-friendly sweeteners like stevia, allulose, or monk fruit extract. After a few weeks of morning coffee and no reaction, I switched from a pinch of monk fruit extract to a dash of my own sugar blend, which is now allulose and monk fruit. Number 4, keep your coffee frozen. Buy coffee in whole bean form and invest in a coffee grinder to grind your beans yourself, little by little. I grind 3 or 4 days worth of coffee at a time and keep the ground coffee in a separate small container in the freezer, right above where I keep the whole beans. This allows for some convenience and limited or no histamine buildup. Number 5, remember that dairy is not always histamine friendly. Personally, I couldn't tolerate it for years, and I found lots of workarounds in the form of milk alternatives and high-quality oils. If you're early in your histamine journey, but it's been long enough that you're trying coffee again, consider adding in a milk alternative and a pinch of monk fruit extract for a low histamine latte. Powdered dairy alternatives can make for a great low histamine coffee creamer, but if you can tolerate it, heavy cream is also heavenly. 6, speaking of which, studies have shown that adding fat to your cup of coffee can stop it from staining your teeth. This is because the tannins in coffee, which would otherwise bind to your teeth, then bind to the fat instead, stopping them from staining. Number 7, drink up. Consume your coffee within half an hour to an hour of making it. Because just like all other foods, the longer you leave it out, the longer a coffee can build up histamine. Well, that's everything, though if you have anything else to add or even want to see a video on coffee alternatives or a coffee taste test, leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe.